Souls-like and roguelike are two genres that are starting to become a little oversaturated in the gaming market, yet if they have some unique premise, as you can see from my recent reviews, I just can't stop myself giving them a go. Witchfire is understandably rough in some areas, but the promise it makes is enchanting. This is an absolutely perfect early access release, giving me just enough to get me hooked, but little enough and enough problems to make me excited for its future. Hi, this is... That was a very weird hi. Hi, this is early... Why am I confused about that? Why does that sound like a question? This is Early Access Inbox, a show focused on early access games, as you might expect from the name, in a semi-casual review format, going over what makes them so unique. While there are plenty of forgettable or mediocre early access releases, it's an excellent way to get yourself on the ground of something that may be big in a couple of years. This show should aim to tell you what you should be testing out. One of the things that is most noticeable about Witchfire is just how quickly it starts. You play a witch hunter called upon by the church who must travel to witch-infested lands, taking on evil beings and purging the wicked epicenter of ungodliness. It borrows heavily from religious themes, and this makes everything in the world feel sort of icky. This works well in its favour. You're given a very brief tutorial, but curiously enough, many of the mechanics you're taught about you can't even use yet. This means much of your training at the start is very conceptual in nature. Your first expedition in one of the 2 lands available in the early access release gives your witch hunter with nothing but a pistol. Well, pistol isn't quite the right word. You will likely get your righteous butt handed to you in your first couple of runs, but this is part of what makes the grind charming. The resource, Witchfire, itself is a material like souls and Dark Souls. You get from defeating all enemies, and this is used to upgrade your level, a figure which is constant throughout runs. When you die, you lose all your Witchfire, but you can go back into the same level to pick them all up again. This mixes the traditional Souls mechanic with a bit of a extraction shooter element. You can spawn into levels and then find portals to get out, but if the portal you're near isn't hopped into soon enough, it'll disappear for the rest of your run. So you can get off now or risk the final boss. Outside of Witchfire itself, you have a research bench giving you more gear and abilities for time spent in game. You can also create a sort of health pack using foraged resources. With all these things together, there's always something to keep your eye on, even if you manage to lose it all in that escape. In this way, it blends the run-based elements of a roguelite with the death mechanics of a Souls-like, as I've mentioned, the gunplay of Bulletstorm, and even some extraction shooter functions. It's an eclectic mix of pre-established ideas, but manages to fuse them together to feel surprisingly fresh. Where Souls-likes are so focused on managing stamina, Witchfire is a little bit more focused on managing distance. You're often more deadly up close, as the starting pistol will alert you to, but they are too. Of course, stamina is used to get from place to place, but your distance is much more important than that stamina bar. There are so many rocks to hide behind, and trees, and even sometimes other enemies. The actual dash mechanic isn't always as important as just looking at your terrain. The starting pistol is only really effective up close, and the game never quite tells you this itself. Witchfire is incredibly esoteric, and this amps up an already difficult opening few hours. In some ways, it's genius. In others, it's hell. There's an example of this. When you decide to level up, the game gets harder, which it takes a little while for you to kind of figure out that's happening. New enemies start to spawn in later runs and they become stronger. You suddenly find yourself being caught out with more traps and hidden places. This means you're actively punished for leveling up, something that never quite nails the landing in regards to balancing. After 5 or so hours, I decided to restart the entire game because over-leveling felt unbalanced. The game became much better when I just stopped paying attention to the leveling structure. This is a shame because on paper I really like the idea of that leveling mechanic. It's something that, with a little bit of testing, I think could be really great in the future. But right now, nothing feels right. I never feel like I'm incentivized to level up at pretty much any point, especially given many of the stats that you end up leveling up don't really do much. Like, you can get a couple of points of extra stamina, and once you've got 5 or so levels, you might be able to get an extra dash. But in that time, you've got 3 new enemies, a new trap, and maybe some more healing. Seeing extra enemies and stronger versions of enemies is sort of a reward for leveling up, but I feel done with it very quickly. Luckily, Witchfire makes me feel really good at the game, even when I'm dying. This is partially due to how fantastic guns feel. Everything has a welcoming kick, and enemies are often exploding or throwing shockwaves out due to buffs earned throughout each run. Instead of making you feel like a weak character bashing your head against someone strong, you feel like 2 strong people put up against each other. In turn, you feel equally likely to kill the other one. When you're dashing, jumping, and hitting headshots, everything kind of clicks and feels great. Then the traversal system gets even more complicated as you go on, adding more moves to use your stamina on, and these can be heightened even further with special rings and relics, where one dash might put a bomb down to hurt someone else, another one makes you a little bit more stealthy. Then you can kind of combine these rings and relics to make a build of some kind. This all ties back to the research system. First, you may opt to research a long-range weapon, giving you a little bit more firepower. Then you grab a new ring, adding to previous moves. After this, upgrade materials to make your starting pistol a little better. This makes you feel like that progress is being made even when you die. These runs are helped by the fact that the game looks really great. Lighting is wonderfully colourful, making the sickly look of the world feel vibrant and eerie at the same time. Things are incredibly dark, but also surprisingly pretty. I did have a few stuttering problems throughout my time with it, but they went as quickly as they came, which is why this gameplay is split up between medium and ultra. I wanted to see how that stuttering would be affected by swapping around. Oddly enough, it didn't really change it that much. On ultra, I got a little bit here and there, and that kind of happened with medium as well. I think it could be down to my device. It could be something that just happens with early access titles. I wouldn't take it too harshly because it didn't happen that often, but it happened enough to warrant mentioning. Instead of settling on a verdict as I might with a kind of a more traditional review, I think how I want to finish today is with its potential. Witchfire has lots of it. There's so much room for it to grow over the coming year with new lands, weapons, items, and more. Unfortunately, it does suffer from some pacing issues as things aren't explained and you're often punished for doing certain actions. I'm not necessarily against esoteric design. In fact, I love everything from Soft and things of that nature. But it still didn't feel like it was fully clicking by the end of my time with the game. The first hour with the game was a slight bit overwhelming, and then it finally settles into something really great after a few hours, only to fade once more. Unfortunately, there's no way to respec your character, so you're left restarting the entire thing just to go back a little bit. Witchfire is great, but gets worse the more you play it. I'm desperately hoping its early access period can solve these teething pains, as there's an excellent game at its core. Even now, I feel an itch to jump around in there. I remember turning to my partner a handful of times and showing off a 30-second clip of, I don't know, a couple of headshots and some dashes. There's something that feels so enjoyable to just exist in that world. I just kind of wish it would do more to let me.